Hi everyone, Carissa here, and today I'm going to show you how I made this copper ring. So if you'd like to see how I did it, please keep watching. Here I'm going to start off with 20 gauge square copper wire, dead soft. I buy all of my wire from Rio Grande Jewelry Supply, and I'm going to cut myself 9.5 inches. So you're going to want to have 3 pieces of 9.5 inches each, like I have here, to start off with to make your ring. Now I'm going to be taking 21 gauge half round copper wire, again from Rio Grande, and I'm going to cut myself 24 inches of that. I'm going to find the center, and then I'm also going to find the center of the 3 pieces of 20 gauge that we cut, and I'm going to start wrapping that half round around the 3 pieces of the 20 gauge. You want to make sure when you're wrapping your half round wire around the square wire that you want the flat side down touching the base, and you want the rounded side upwards. And it leaves a really beautiful finish. Make sure that when you are wrapping it, you are pulling nice and tight. You want those wires at the base to stay nice and flat. You can crimp it as you go. It makes it a lot easier. So here I have wrapped it quite a few times, and I made sure that they are nice and uniform, staying right next to each other. You don't want them to overlap because it will leave bumps and it won't look good, and it can be uncomfortable also when wearing the ring. So here I am going to continue wrapping the piece. I have gone ahead and adjusted my wires and pushed them together. Now I'm going to go ahead and give that little end wire a snip, and I'm going to snip it in the center of my 3 wires. If you're using 2 wires, then you want to find the center of the 2 wires and then snip it there. This is going to be on the outside of the ring, and it's going to be hidden so that way it can't catch or poke you when you're wearing it. So here I'm going to flatten down all of my wires. That way they're nice and uniform and taut. And so I will go ahead and use my flat nose Xuron pliers. I will have a link in the description to my Amazon store list showing all of the pliers and all of the tools that I use. Here I'm making sure that all of my wires look nice and neat. And then here is the rest of my wire, because we did start in the middle of the half round wire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start wrapping that other side. And the reason I like to start in the center of my half round is because it makes it a lot easier to work with. If you start at one end of 24 inches of half round, you're going to have a twisted mess everywhere, and it's just going to be really difficult to use. So that's why I like to do that little trick. And here I'm going to keep wrapping around my 3 base wires until I get to my desired length, depending on what size of ring you're making. I'm going to be making a size 7 ring, and I have a little cheat sheet that I use of a piece of scrap wire. I went ahead and took that piece of wire, wrapped it around my mandrel on the size 7, and then I flattened it back out. So I continued to wrap until I almost got to that desired length of my cheat sheet. I don't go all the way to the end because I do want to leave some room for my stone when I am setting the base. So I'm going to crimp all of these wires down. You do not want to cut the little tail of the wire that you have left. We're going to be using that for the base of the stone. And the amount of wire that you need left over is going to depend on the size of your stone. So for my stone size, which is about a 5 millimeter, 6 millimeter stone, I have about 5 or 6 inches left over. So I'm going to measure against my cheat sheet again to see how much more I need to wrap. And that looks good. I have about 4 millimeters until I reach the little end of my cheat sheet. So that's perfect because that's going to be awesome for the base that we're going to wrap and make here right now for the stone to sit on. So I'm going to wrap it around my size 7 section of the mandrel, and I'm going to flatten that down. So when you're flattening your wires down, you want to make sure that there are no gaps in between. Right now I am just checking to make sure I am still on the size 7 for my ring. Once you have done that, you can see if that little gap between the wires is going to be large enough for your stone. Looks like mine is perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you here again how much room there is for my little stone. And then I'm going to take that tail that we have, I'm going to wrap that around all of the base wires. And this part is a little tricky because to start off, sometimes it doesn't want to lay flat. So you might need to coax it with your pliers, but be gentle because you don't want to break this weaving wire. And here I am going ahead and I'm flattening that out. As you can see, it's not as tight as I want it to be, so I'm going to adjust it and make sure that it is looking right before I continue with the other wires. So you see here I'm using my flat nose pliers to kind of make it the shape that I want it to be, make sure it's fitting tight and nice and even. And you don't want any gaps between this wire and your base either. You want to make sure that you're continually flattening it down, that way it's a nice tight even fit. So I'm going to continue wrapping around all of the wires until I get to the length that I need for my stone. I'm just making sure I take my time, that way they are all uniform, nice next to each other and even. Here I'm checking to see what it looks like so far and how much more I need in order for my stone to fit comfortably. So I decided I need a couple more wraps and then I'll be looking at it again. As you can see, I'm constantly flattening my wire and checking it to make sure it still looks nice and even, because I want it to look great and I don't want any pieces sticking up for the final result. So I close that one again there. I'm just looking at it, showing you how it looks so far. And then from here I am checking to see if my stone is going to fit properly on there, and that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to snip that wire. Again, I'm going to do it in the center of the piece. That way when it's squished down, we don't have anything sticking out that's going to cause irritation or catch on anything. Now that I've gone ahead and adjusted everything that I wanted to be adjusted, I'm going to either pull or push my ring band to my ring top right there where we're going to set the stone, so the base, and I'm going to separate these 3 wires. That way it kind of holds its place a little bit and it doesn't keep slipping. So you'll see me do that on the other side as well. So this is what your ring should look like so far. We are going to go ahead and make sure there are no pokey parts sticking out that can scratch you or catch on anything. And we are going to take the innermost wire here, and that is actually going to be the outside wire. When first making this ring, I had to learn the hard way because the innermost wire is actually not going to be the inner wire on the ring, but the outside of the ring. So here is a piece of 21 gauge half round that we originally used, and this piece is about 4 inches long, and I'm going to wrap that around the 2 inner wires. So first I'm going to start on one of the wires, wrap that around nice and steady, and it's okay if there's a few gaps between it because we'll push it together. It's a little hard doing this part, but it's well worth it. So I went ahead and adjusted it, pushed it together, and you only want to do a few wraps before you push it all the way to the center, because the more wraps you do, the harder it gets to push. And then I will go ahead and finish the rest of these wraps around until my desired length. So I've gone ahead and wrapped it a couple more times around that inner wire, and I'm going to snip the very bottom. Now I'm going to take my short nose grip pliers from Xuron and I'm going to tighten that piece down. That way it's on the inside and it's not going to poke anybody or snag anything. I'm just pulling that piece, that way it's as close to the base as it can possibly be. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So here I am taking that 21 gauge half round wire, and again about 4 to 5 inches should do the job for this small of a stone. If you're wrapping a larger stone, then you definitely want to add more wire to this part, make it a little bit longer. Here you can see that it's going to be a little bit difficult for me to try to move it down to the bottom. I wrapped a little bit too many times. So this is what I was saying, if you wrap just a couple of times to get it going and then wrap the rest once you have moved it down towards the base, it makes it a lot easier. So again, continue wrapping it until your desired length. I want to try to match the other side, and I will end up using the whole length of the wire that I cut. In this video, I am using the Tronix flush wire cutters. They are on the higher end side, and you do not need these wire cutters in order to start wire wrapping. I have used the Xuron flush wire cutters for many years, and they work just fine. Here I am flattening my wire down, making sure it is secured. That way we can move on and continue wrapping around that base wire until we get to the length that we need. Here I go ahead and measure to see how many millimeters I have so far, and I'm at about 12 right now. I probably will end up at probably around 15 to 17 millimeters total length once I'm done wrapping the rest of this wire around that base wire. So here you can see I decided that I wanted to just go ahead and almost finish off the wires that I started with and twist them a little bit longer, just because I felt like it was going to suit the stone better, which it turned out it did. So I'm happy that I went ahead and did that. And I'm just adjusting them, trying to make sure that they are down towards the base as close as they can possibly be. So you see me using my nail there, pushing them down, using the pliers to get that good grip. And now that I have done that, I'm going to move on to the middle wire. So for the middle wire, I wanted it to be twisted, so I'm going to use my pin vise here. It is a hand pin vise. It's not electronic. It only works on square wire, and what it does is it allows you to make nice uniform little swirly pattern with the square wire. You can use pliers. You do not need this tool. I just find this tool to be very helpful, and it is my go-to when making this nice pattern on the square wire. It's only about $4 to $5 on Amazon, And again, I will have an Amazon tool list of mine listed in the description showing all of the tools that I use. So what you do is you put your square wire in there, you twist it to tighten it, and then you twist the little tool, and you can twist as much or as little as you'd like depending on the desired pattern. Now that we have all of the wires the way I want them to be, so the most inner wire is going to be left alone. The middle wire is going to be that nice little pattern, and the outside wire is going to be wrapped with that half round. I find molding my wires to the shape of my stone before I set the stone in is the easiest way to do this without the stone plopping out and getting frustrated. It's a little bit different when you're using different shapes of stones, but I find that even with the oval shaped stones, it works pretty well to just try and get it to the best shape possible and then put the stone in there and work it out from there. So I'm just constantly twisting all of my wires along and making sure they're in the correct spots. So again, as you see here, that the most inner wire is going to be the square wire that's just been left alone. The middle wire is going to be the patterned wire, and the outside wire is going to be the half round wire. Doing this for the first time can be a bit tricky and tedious. I've been working with wire for almost 5 years now, so it's a lot easier for me to kind of bend the wires the way I want them to go because I've used them so long. But if you're new to it, it might be a little bit more difficult, but it's certainly not something that can't be learned. You can learn anything just with a bit of practice. And here I am going ahead and using my flat nose pliers, and I am adjusting the size to fit my stone a bit better, and that is looking pretty good. So I'm just going to make sure that I adjust my wires a little bit more and push each side in a little bit more as well. You want to do this very gently because you do not want to bend your wires and lose all of the work that you just did. This is what the piece is looking like so far, and you can really make this ring into many different designs. You can use beads, you can use different styles of wire as far as different gauges of half round, or you can use round wire. This is just what came to my mind, so I wanted to go ahead and make it, and all of you wanted to see how it was done, so this is why I made y'all a video. Now I'm checking the size of the stone compared to what my base for the stone is looking like, and it is fitting pretty good. I do want it to be a bit more snug, so I'm adjusting my wires, and I'm going to get my pliers and kind of adjust it again to be a bit more snug fitting for the stone. So I'm constantly adjusting and readjusting, and just when you thought you've done enough, you might want to do a little bit more. That way your ring comes out the best that it can possibly come out. So here again you can see that I'm adjusting it, and this time I'm using my fingers to kind of flatten it out, and I will go ahead and come in with my pliers again. And once it looks perfectly good, we're going to take those two most inner wires that we just wrapped around the stone, and we are going to push them through the center of the band and pull them out the other side. You might have to use pliers. Sometimes I have to use pliers. Sometimes I can just use my fingers, so it really just depends. This is going to be one of the most crucial parts when making your ring because you do not want your stone to fall out. You want to make sure that this initial wire first touching the stone is going to hold the stone in place. You don't want your stone to break, so you don't want to give it too much tension. Or pull it too hard, but you do want it to have enough tension, that way it does not fall out. So here we go on the other side, and we are pushing the wires through the ring, and we are bringing them out on the other side. Now we are going to fold them over the band of the ring, and we are going to do that on the other side and adjust them and make sure that they are holding on to that stone nice and taut. Here I am bringing over the other wire on the other side, and this is what it looks like so far. So we just want to make sure that the stone is fitting nice and snug in there. It's not wiggling around, it can't pop out. If your stone is wiggling around a little bit, you can take your pliers and adjust it and get it a little bit tighter. That way you can make sure you're not going to lose it. Once you have done that, you can take your cutters, and again, I like to cut that way the ends will be in the middle of the stone. I'm going to tuck these under that wire. That way when you wear it, they cannot poke you, they can't snag on anything. And this is one of the things that's a little bit difficult to do, is making sure that wire is nice and snug inside of the other wire. Now with every wire that we do, we are going to be using the same technique of tucking that wire under itself basically and flattening it down. That way it is nice and secure. Here I am on that other side where I just cut the wire, and I'm making sure I push that end in as far as I can. That way it is under itself basically. And then I'm tightening it a little bit on top. You want to be very, very, very gentle when you do this, because first you can deform your wire, and second you can get nicks in your wire. The nicks aren't too bad as long as they're not super deep, because when they're super deep, then the integrity of your wire is going to be compromised and it might break. If it's just a little surface nick, then you should be able to get it out with buffing tools. I usually use my buffing tools on my Dremel, and they work really nicely to make sure that my jewelry looks as flawless as it possibly can. Here I'm going to be taking that second wire, and I'm going to be feeding that through the center of my band with my thumb, pulling it out with my fingers, and I am going to be pushing that on top of the band, and I will do that on the other side as well. So here I am, it's going over the band, and then I'm going to push that wire with my thumb through the band, pull it out the other side. Sometimes you might need pliers, sometimes you can get it out with your fingers. It just depends. And adjust it, and then push it over the top. And this is what it's looking like so far. So I'm just adjusting it, making sure that the wires are as close together as possible. Then I'm taking my wire cutters and I'm cutting that in the center of the band. That way that wire can be tucked under itself, just like we did the first two wires. We do not want it poking or sticking out, and we want it nice and tight. That way it holds and does not come undone. So here I am going to adjust it, I'm going to tighten it down, and these pliers work so perfectly for that because they're short, yet they have a thicker little tip than the tweezer nose pliers that I usually use, but they are thinner than like regular flat nose pliers as well. So here on the other side, I'm going to do the same thing, cut it in the center, that way we can tuck it under itself and tighten it up. Once I'm done pushing these together, tightening it up and making sure that piece is under itself, I can go ahead and look at the bottom and push those two wires together to make sure that they are as close as possible. And now that everything is all secured and nice and tight, we can go ahead and move on to the last two wires that we wrapped with the 21 gauge half round wire. And so here I'm going to be wrapping it, making sure that the edge of the band meets up with a half round wire. And on this side, I'm going to have to unravel it just a couple of times because it's overlapping just a bit and I want it to meet up exactly with the edge of the band. I'd rather unravel it than have to wrap a couple of them. It just makes it a lot easier. So I'd say wrap more than you need and go from there. So here I unwrap it one more time, and then I'm going to take my cutters and I'm going to snip it towards the bottom. That way that piece is hidden and cannot poke or snag you when you're wearing the ring. I've gone ahead and secured that piece. I'm going to take a look at it again. It looks good. It matches up with the edge of the band. So I'm going to push it through the middle of the ring and bring it through the other side, just like we've done with all the other wires. Adjust it to make sure it looks good. Again, you don't want it too tight because you want to be able to see that pattern and you don't want the other wires to be on top of it. Here I'm going to look at the other side and see if the edge of the half round meets up with the outside of the band, just like we did the other one. And I'm going to unravel it one time because I feel like that is going to best suit this side. Once I go ahead and snip that with my wire cutters, I'm going to crimp that down again, just like we did, and make sure it's nice and secured. Again, you always want to make sure that it goes to the bottom. That way it can't unravel and then poke and snag. So I'm just going to go ahead and push that wire through, just like I did. Pull it out of the other side. And I am going to fold it over. That way we can snip both sides and tuck them under and make sure it looks nice and tidy. Nothing is going to be sticking out, nothing is going to be poking, and we will almost be finished. These last two wires can be a little bit difficult, but you just want to get them as close to the other two wires as you possibly can and underneath that last very top wire, and then squish it down, and that way that there are no parts sticking out. And these pliers make it really nice because they have a stronger tip than the tweezer nose pliers do, but they get into small areas that the regular flat nose pliers cannot get into. Here I am making sure that it's nice and secured, and I pushed very gently down at the very top. I checked with my finger to make sure that I did not nick the wire at all, and I'm going to be doing the same thing to this other side. Here I'm going to go ahead and lift up this wire gently. That way I can fit my pliers underneath and secure it a little bit better. Push that wire against the other two wires. That way it is completely hidden and you cannot see it or feel it from the top or the side. And so once I've gone ahead and taken a look at the piece to make sure that everything is secured, everything looks even, I will go ahead and antique and polish this piece with liver of sulfur. I hope you all enjoyed, and I can't wait to hear what you thought. If you have any suggestions, please leave them down below in the comments, and I hope to see you next time with a new tutorial video very soon. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for watching.